Well, today's kind of a treat for me because I'm actually doing the webinar from the On One office here in Portland, Oregon. I'm usually up in Seattle, so it's kind of nice to actually be where the action happens. Okay, so the topic of the webinar today is basically exploring Vietnam. It's on my trip to Vietnam that I took last year in November. I wanted to share some photos that I took along with some of the stories behind the photos. Give some travel tips, things that I kind of learned while I was actually out traveling, and just share my experience, basically. And then, of course, I'm going to go ahead and, towards the end of the webinar, hopefully not the far end of it, I'm going to be walking through some editing of the images, and mostly in On One software. But I'll kind of start out with this first photo here, and the first few photos that I have. If anyone out there has ever been to Southeast Asia, this is a very common sight. You see a lot of the motorbikes, and it was really one of the first things that I noticed after getting off the plane and walking out. And the reason I went to Vietnam is, well, I really just wanted to get out and travel. I'm single. I'm attached at this point, but I was unattached when I decided I wanted to take a really amazing, adventurous vacation. And it's difficult when you're traveling by yourself, when you're solo traveling. And I just had to, I really wanted to go somewhere. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to search online. I'm going to find something, and I'm just going to go. I'm just going to do it, because it's tough making that first step. And there's something about Vietnam. I really didn't know anything about the country or the culture or the people. And I was drawn to it for some reason. I think just photos I'd seen or stories I'd heard. So I picked it. And I actually went through a group travel company. I wanted something really simple and basic, so it was a very basic trip. I just wanted to get from place to place to place. I started in Ho Chi Minh City, and we made our way all the way up to Hanoi, and I ended up going up to Sapa, which is a little further north. But I just needed a way to get around the country in a place that was completely foreign and unfamiliar to me. So getting off the plane, I was actually pretty scared and pretty nervous because I had no idea what to expect. And so this scene right here in this photo is really one of the first things that I kind of comes to mind when I think of what I saw, because it was night and we were driving around. So motorbikes, huge part of the culture there. There are probably more motorbikes than cars. And getting around is you kind of have to learn how to cross the street, which makes it fun, especially when you're carrying a camera, because of course, like in this picture, I wanted to photograph the motorbikes as much as possible and kind of just stop. I stopped on my way across the street here and took the picture. Of course, they were all stopped at the light, so I didn't have to fear for my life at that point. But some of the intersections are pretty scary and pretty ridiculous. And you see a lot of interesting things and interesting people that make them photographable. Here, this isn't too crazy. You've got a woman with a big thing of balloons. I saw, like, at one point, something that a small truck should have been carrying on the back of a motorbike, just piled really high. You see families of 4, families of 5. This photo, while it's extremely blurry, it's really not the best photo. I was attempting some panning, and most of them didn't really turn out very well, and this one was one of those. But it's funny to me. You've got this dog sitting on the bike, and it just makes me laugh.
Can you maybe either hit I to bring up your extras, because people want to know some of your camera settings?
Oh, absolutely. Let's see here. Some people are asking about camera settings, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up my metadata here.
Just hit the I key if you want.
The I key?
Yeah, it'll bring up the information.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, that works. Okay, let me go ahead.
There it is.
All right, there we go. Okay, so now y'all can see my metadata. Now, a lot of these photos are actually unedited, unprocessed. It's taken me forever for some reason to actually get through and do final editing. And I think part of it is just because I'm still trying to decide all of the images that I want that are my favorites. When you're creating photos, oftentimes we have in our head the one that we really like, and then we kind of go back to it again and again. But I find myself going through these photos over and over and over, and I keep finding new ones that I really like. But sorry, back to the motorbike, kind of that discussion. One of the things that I did while out there is I wanted to just kind of be a little bit adventurous and take a few risks. I'm actually very afraid of motorcycles. You see, they just seem scary and dangerous to me. So one thing that I did was I decided that I was going to go completely against that and take some trips around the cities on the back of a motorbike. I didn't actually drive the thing myself, but this is one of the, I guess, the girls that I hired for the day to just, I hopped on the back of her bike and she drove me around. I had my camera with me and I got some really amazing photos. The majority of the photos that I'm in love with are because I decided to just jump on a bike and, ride around and see what I could find. This is actually the guy that took me around on the first trip, and that was probably the most fun. I'm going to share some of the photos I got from that and from the other trip. Just the little, that little was like a couple hours of driving around. And this is a photo of me. I really just, I took my 5D Mark II along with my 70-200, and I just slung it around. And I also had my Think Tank retrospective, I think it's a 10, retrospective 10 slung on the other side, so that way if I wanted to change lenses. But I found myself really just keeping that 70-200 on there the whole time, and gave me a little bit of opportunity to get closer to the subjects that I wanted to photograph instead of having you get real close to everything. And this is one of the photos I got on those little trips around. Things I would have never seen if I had just stuck to the cities and taken cabs and walked around. Just finding amazing people and different sites, outside of just the tourist areas. Saw a lot of water buffaloes. These things are beautiful, but they're kind of scary too. You kind of wonder if they're just going to start charging at you. Some of them found me very interesting, even from somewhat great distance away. This guy actually, I thought he was going to come after me, so I started walking back. He started walking into that water in front, and that's another photo of him. I'm always curious what's going on in their heads when they saw me, because they always were looking over at me. Oops, let me get back over here. So, just found a lot of unique people. There's a lot of poverty out in some of the areas. It was very just foreign, to what I'm used to seeing. I think what a lot of us are used to seeing. But the great thing about just getting on the back of that motorbike was this is one of those occasions when I saw this woman working in the field. I could just tap him on the shoulder and jump off and just run out with my camera. And everybody saw me. They had no idea what I was doing. They didn't know what I was photographing, which kind of made it even a little bit more fun. I love to photograph people. I have a few more photos towards the end of this slideshow that I'm going to share. But just little kids, everybody's curious. You see somebody, especially me. I obviously look very different from from everybody that lives in native to Vietnam. And I think my hair in like pigtails and braids, and my big camera with my big white lens, and I was definitely easy. Kind of stood out everywhere I went, but. If it made people a little bit more interested in looking at me, then I didn't really mind. And, one thing when you do travel is it's always good to do a little bit of research and find places. It doesn't have to be every single day or every hour of every single day that you want, things you want to do. But I did some research. I'm not sure if it was before or while I was there. I was able to access internet. So when I was in one of the villages, I believe this is a Tan Ha pottery village outside of Hoi An. I apologize to anyone if I'm butchering the pronunciation of those cities. But I'm really into pottery. I took some pottery about a year ago when I lived in Salt Lake City. And so that was something that I just was very interested in, and I knew there was a pottery village, so I sought it out, and I got on that the woman who had the motorbike. She took me out to this little village, and this woman here, I believe, is 88 years old, just crouched down, and this is the kind of the pullback scene of the little studio. It's not even motorized. You've got the one woman kicking it with her foot, and then the other woman making the small pots. And I had to get some really tight shots. Her hands were just absolutely beautiful. The texture and really contrasted with the motion of the wheel and the texture of the clay. So,
Hey, Nicole.
Yes.
There was a question about when you shoot people here, do you always go for model releases? Or
When I'm shooting, oh, so the question is when I'm photographing out places like Vietnam, if I get model releases. Now, I don't. The reason is these are not for my, the photos you're seeing here are not for my stock portfolio as far as the commercial side of things go. So I'm not trying to get these images to be used in any kind of advertising or commercial purposes. This was a trip that I took for personal reasons. I wanted to create art. I wanted to create, some maybe photographs I can hang on my wall. But I also have a lot of the photos in here will be going into my editorial stock portfolio where you don't need model releases for most cases. And they can only be used in things like newspapers or editorial blog postings. So the answer is no, I didn't get releases. If I were here, let's say I was doing stock work for a company who needed releases, yes, and it would be a completely different situation. I would have to have either a translator or what's called a fixer, where you have somebody that's native or a local person who knows the area and can speak the language. Then I would actually be able to get releases, but because I don't know any Vietnamese and I wasn't really there for that purpose, I just created the photos and I didn't worry about it because I'm not going to be using them in any kind of occasion where I would need a release. So.
I have a few other questions.
Sure.
Tapas was asking, what's the attitude? What was the attitude of the people like that you were shooting?
Sure. The question is, I'm not sure if you all can hear what Brian's saying. So the question is what the attitude of the people was when I was photographing them. Most everybody was very nice and very smiling and positive in front of the camera. Very, very few people kind of gave me the, kind of like crossed their arms and saying, don't take my picture. But if I was far enough away from them to where they couldn't see me photographing them, then I didn't really, I would just take their picture. If I wanted a more candid photo, if I was close enough to where they could see me, I could see them, I would kind of do I'd kind of look at them, I'd smile. I'd kind of do a little point to them, and then I'd point at my camera and, with like a little quizzical look on my face. And, and then they would understand non-verbally that I'm asking if I can photograph them. And most of the time they said yes. So the people of Vietnam are just so wonderful and nice. It was a beautiful country in so many ways. So that's so a very good attitude. They had a very good attitude about everything. So, all right. So moving on. I'm going to get into just a little bit of talking about food and photography and people and culture. I'm a food photographer, and so, of course, I'm also a foodie. And so one of the things that fascinated me about Vietnam was just the cuisine. I don't think I'd ever had pho before I went to Vietnam. So, and I'm not even sure what I was eating here. It was on this is an iPhone. I have a few photos from my iPhone scattered in here, and this is one of them. I tried to take pictures of a lot of the food that I was eating, just, quick snapshots of them just to kind of remember. But I got this it was like my first real cuisine, my first real meal in Vietnam at a street stand, just some woman cooking on the side of the street. And I don't know what it was. It was good. It was spicy and had some strange meat and tofu, and I don't know what was in there, but it was delicious. And this is this actually it's kind of Brian knows what this is, so he already is reacting to it. This is barbecued rat. I really wish it was dark or bright enough for me to get a better photo of it. Now, I didn't eat this whole thing. It was with the group of people I was with, and they had it and just for us to try. And I think I was one of like maybe 3 people who tried it. I'm very adventurous when it comes to anything, including food. And it was barbecued rat. It didn't really taste like much. There was very little meat on it. But yeah, so this is some of the things that wasn't unusual for people to eat or get on a side of a little stand on the side of the street. I think I also ended up trying a duck embryo. It was cooked, but it was, that was another strange thing that I got to try while I was out there. I also got a little artsy with my iPhone and my food. Why not, right? But, food unites people. It's a huge part of any culture. And you find most of the people, wherever there is food, that's where people are also going to be. And, so I was always trying to find the street markets. It wasn't really difficult because they were always like right around the corner. Get some little snails for lunch or whatever. And this is when having that lens, the 70-200, comes in handy because I'm able to get in real tight on things and kind of just photograph people. And most of the time, they probably didn't even know that I was there, which is not a bad thing. It's not like I'm trying to be sneaky and, trying to capture pictures of people doing things they shouldn't be doing. I just want people to be in their element and not, sometimes it's good to have people look at the camera. Sometimes you don't want that to happen. And this is just an iPhone picture of the market. I brought my iPhone along. I really wanted to share my photos while I was creating them. So I did a lot of, I blogged a few of my pictures from my iPhone. I maybe Instagram, or I'm not even sure if I was using Instagram at that point. I'd Twitter them out. Oh, I'm sure I was using Instagram. What am I talking about? I'd Twitter them out. I would, Google Plus, however I would share photos, I'd get them out. And part of the reason was because I actually wanted to, and I'll talk about this too a little later, I wanted to copyright all my images when I got back, and I didn't want to share the ones from my Mark II while I was out shooting them. So I'll talk about that a little later when I finish through the slideshow. But I was also photographing people while they were eating. This is just the cutest little girl. I'm not sure what she was laughing at, but, using chopsticks, and it's just so adorable. People at the market, again, people of all ages. I found people, actually harvesting, cultivating the lands and planting seeds. And fishing. This guy had some just beautiful light on him. That's what caught my eye for this image. And, in the best, I think some of the best moments that we have are the ones that we're not looking for. I was actually on a walk, and I think it was in Nha Trang, and I just decided to go on a really long walk with my camera, and I happened upon this woman and her family. It was actually 4 generations of women. It was an older woman, so I guess the great-grandmother, this woman here who's the grandmother, a mother, and then her 2 children, her 2 girls. A little bit pulled back version. I just walked past. I just kind of smiled and and said hello, and they basically said sit down. They got a little chair out and they had made me sit down and were feeding me, and which was wonderful because the food was good. It was I'm not sure what they are. They're just some kind of like pancake with looks like it's got some squid and some shrimp dipped in a sauce. And that's the cooking. I didn't really get any good photos of them actually cooking the food because I was more interested in the people that I was sitting with, both the older woman and the young girl, which I'll show in a moment. Just had very unique faces and just really, the little girl especially is very cute. But in order to, I could have just walked up and tried to photograph them or just, been very nice and then said, could I photograph them? But because I sat down and I had, even though it was nonverbal, I had a conversation with them, so to speak. I sat down and the woman was very interested in me. She was touching my hair and my earrings and just in my rings on my finger. And, and it was just this kind of like bonding experience. And then the little girl was very shy at first, and she was just so cute. I really wanted to get a photo of her, so I sat there long enough, which maybe was like 5 or 10 minutes. I think I ended up paying like 50 cents, equivalent of about 50 cents for the meal. And she finally warmed up to me, so I was able to get a photograph. But, it's not something, if you just jump right in and try and take someone's picture, sometimes it's not as, you're not going to get the same results as if you had spent time with them and developed some kind of bond or some trust with them, so that way they're not seeing you as a camera, they're seeing you as a person. They're maybe going to open up a little bit more. And here's another occasion I was walking through. I believe it was some sort of a pagoda or a temple grounds, and I was just walking through just to see what it was like. And there were these people just randomly eating a meal. And I walked past. I wasn't really trying to find food, but they made me sit down, and so I got to eat some, I'm not sure what I was eating. It was good. And And then I took pictures, I photographed them, and I got some pretty good, interesting interactions with people. And it's like I wasn't even there. They weren't looking at me. I was just another part of the group. Another thing with traveling that is one thing I really actually enjoy about traveling is that it's like time is different. So it's much easier for me to get up really, really early in the morning. And of course time changes and things like that. Sometimes it shifts to your advantage to get up early. And you're going to find, I think, better shots. And sometimes it's just you're going to find photos that you wouldn't even be able to find in the middle of the day. But I got up early. This is it's like the Imperial Palace, I believe, in Hue, and it was nice in the morning. It was a little bit misty, but there were also no other people there at all. I was the only person in the entire area. So, and as I was, I got a few photos, and who knows, it may have been completely crowded by the time I actually, would have gone with the rest of the group. The group that I was with ended up going about an hour or two after I did. So by the time I was leaving, they were all going through the gates along with the entire rest of the tourist population of the city. So I was able to get some good photographs without actually being interrupted. And it's not just the one photo, but if you find something that you love, you can spend time on it. You're not going to be in anyone's way. I spent about 10 solid minutes in this hallway. I left, and then I came back and probably spent another 20 minutes in it. And I'm not sure if I came out with something, amazing enough that 20 minutes, maybe I could have got something better. Maybe I got something that's great that I just don't know yet. But the fact that I was able to spend that time, that's kind of what was important to me. And when I was in Hoi An is a very, very popular place for people to travel to. It's beautiful. All of the walls look like this, or there's some variation of this, and they're very colorful and bright. There are a lot of shops. People go there to get clothes custom tailored. The food's good. It's like they're riverfront, so lots of little boats and fishing and markets. But I don't even think I would have been able to find this wall. The laundry on this wall wouldn't have even been there, and I wouldn't have seen it. I think I even walked through after I photographed this during the day when there were a bunch of people, gobs of people on the street. And I looked for this and I couldn't find it because there were either motorbikes all parked up against it or it was just completely unrecognizable. And this is a variation of this with just the laundry, which I'm going to get to in a second here. This is the iPhone version of it that I shared. These are my favorite pictures. I would say this one right here. This is an unedited version of it, but this is my favorite frame from my trip to Vietnam. And I would not have gotten it if I think I got up at 5 or 6 in the morning. I got up really, really early. So another thing about getting up early is you're gonna have light. You're gonna have different light, and you're gonna, again, I was able to photograph this because there was nobody walking around, and I thought I got the shot after I got this image, but then as I almost started walking away, and the light finally, it just came out and was just amazingly gorgeous and beautiful. And the angle of the light, these are things that you see, you're going to see this early in the morning. You're not going to get this in the middle of the day with the light coming straight down on, straight up ahead. So, and this is just another early morning photograph. And, when you're traveling too, another thing you want to keep in mind is you want to kind of be open to anything. Don't we all have expectations of what we want to happen. And, for me, I went on a little bike trip with another girl to a smaller island off of Hoi An. And I just, I thought we were just going to rent a couple of bikes and just ride around by ourselves, and I'd be able to jump out and take some pictures. And I guess we unintentionally hired this guy to go with us because we didn't know what we were doing. And so this gentleman was going to give us a tour. And I was we were following him, and I was just so frustrated because I didn't, I wanted to stop, and I wanted to take pictures, and I wanted to find things, and I didn't want to have to, it wasn't just a bike trip for me, it was biking and photography. So, he took us around, and it ended up being a really amazing experience because that's him and that's his brother. he took us to his family's house. So we got to see, like, most of his entire family. We met his parents, his brother, I think a niece and his sister. I'm not exactly sure how everyone was related. But we got, I got to just experience, like, real life in Vietnam and see real houses. So, and I kind of felt badly about being frustrated with, not getting to do what I wanted to do when actually I was doing something that was just really an amazing experience that I would not have been able to even ask for and know how to ask for.
Hey.
Yes.
You. There are, actually, I commented we have some of the best questions, like some really good questions, but the two that I want to ask is, one, how do you keep track of where these images were in terms of geotagging?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second was your parents' safety of your gear and you as a person. Like, did you ever feel like you were unsafe or your gear was unsafe?
Okay, so the first question is about geotagging and how I know where all these photos were taken. Well, I don't have any type of... I looked into trying to find some kind of geotagging system for my camera. The only things I could find that were reliable-ish were the things that you could connect. Maybe, you could start your iPhone, sync it to your phone, and then just sync it all but when you got back. But I really could never get those things to work for me, and it seemed like such a burden. So that's part of the reason why I actually decided to do a lot of photography with my iPhone, because in theory, and I haven't really looked into it much, but in theory, the iPhone photos, should be geotagged, so I can load those up, and I know about where the other photos were taken. I also imported all of my photos, on a daily basis or a location basis. So every time, and I also have a fairly good memory from just like where I was when I took the photo. But as far as specific locations, I'm at a loss for some of the things. I actually have on pre-order, because I bought the 5D Mark III. I have that camera, but I pre-ordered the Canon GPS unit for that. So that's kind of my solution, and for future photo shoots, especially when I'm going out and doing really big trips like this. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for everyone because not everybody has a Mark III or a camera where you can put one of those things on it. So. And I really don't understand why they don't put them in all cameras. If they can put them in point-and-shoot cameras, they should be able to put them in SLR cameras. But so that's kind of how I'm going to be in the future I'm going to be doing it. But, using my iPhone and just taking a few pictures here and there with my iPhone kind of gives me a good, roundabout area of where I was located. And I know what hotels I stayed at, so I could always look at the hotel and at least, get some kind of a, radius, a few miles radius from where I was at the hotel. And what was the second question, Brian?
Just your general safety.
General safety
for your gear.
Okay, so the question is about general safety for my gear and how I, kept myself, my stuff, or just my gear.
And you.
And me. So how I kept everything safe. I felt very safe in Vietnam, and it may be because I was with a guide, or I was with a group of people. So there was somebody where if something happened to me, then it would, I had someone to call. I had a contact. For my gear, I brought my Pelican case, my 1510 with me, which in retrospect was maybe a little bit much because it was kind of a pain to carry around, from hotel to hotel, especially on the overnight trains. But I was able to, I brought like a bike cable kind of a thing. You can buy these, actually. I bought a big like locking thing. I think I got it from REI. And I would wrap that up and then just connect it to something that was secured in the hotel room. Like, I've heard toilet seats. I don't think I did the toilet seat. But, you can secure them to anything that's really, locked down in your hotel room. So that way you don't have to worry about your gear getting stolen. And, yeah, that's most of what I did. I will say that if you're in a place like Vietnam when you have a lot, or Southeast Asia in general, you've got these motorbikes, you really have to be careful that you're not carrying a sling, just something slinging over your shoulder. You want something to really go from, across across from one shoulder to your other hip. You don't just want it like a purse dangling off of one side or a bag or a camera, because people will have been known, and actually somebody that we were with, they attempted this. It didn't work for them because they actually were carrying it very securely. But people on their motorbikes have a tendency to, not everybody, but the ones that are not the not nice people, they will ride their motorbikes past, and then somebody on the back will grab your bag and then just keep going. So, you do have to be careful with that. And I slung my camera across my shoulder the entire time. I used, for that trip, I believe I had a black rapid strap, and I have a different variation that I use a lot now as well, and those are really great straps, especially for stuff like this. You don't really have to, I mean, sure, somebody could beat you down and take your camera gear, but I felt very safe there. I think, anywhere I go, you just kind of want to look. I was by myself too. You want to look into where you're going. You want to do your research. I was trying to find a place that was safe for a single woman to travel to, and when I'm going by myself everywhere. So there. Did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. I'm going to just kind of move on and just talk about a little bit about photographing people. I kind of talked about it a little bit before. I love photographing people. They move, they're interesting, they make different faces, and there are always so many things going on. I got a few photos of this man just fixing a bike, on the side of the road. I really wish that I just snapped this with my iPhone. We were just walking to dinner, I believe. Kind of makes me wish I ran back and grabbed my Mark II, because it's just a beautiful scene, in its own way, I guess. They don't clean their floors very often in the barbershops there, it looks like. But I would say that probably about 80% of the photos I have of Vietnam have people in them. Sometimes it's just finding the right light. This was in a post office. This woman here, she was so cute. We walked past this while we were going to, I'm not exactly sure where we were, but we were walking up to see a monument or a statue of some sort. And she wasn't sitting there at the time. And then we walked back, and I saw her, and it was just like this perfect moment. And she was laughing because I was photographing her, which is always, I think that a lot of the reactions that we get with people, whether they look serious or they're laughing, it's because they're either trying to figure out what you're doing, or they're not quite sure why you're photographing them, so they're kind of laughing about it. This man was totally cool with me taking his picture. I got one, and then I realized, I'm going to try it from a different angle. I think I like this one a lot better.
Yeah.
And this guy right here, he knew I was taking his picture, so that's why he's the big grin on his face. I was just walking down the road, and, a strange white woman with pigtails and a big, huge camera. Maybe they don't see many of my kind. I'm not sure. And this guy, he was with that other worker. He definitely wanted to pose for that one. I love this one. The photos before actually consist of this man with some other men, and there's a cockfight going on in the photos, and for some reason they had a baby. So. This was a fortune teller on a bridge. A lot of people actually been to Vietnam probably have seen her or have heard of her. I think I paid $1 to get my fortune read, and then I felt after that, it was really an interesting experience. And then I felt comfortable enough to take her picture, and she was okay with it. I don't really agree with paying people to photograph them. Sometimes if you take someone's picture, they might ask for money. I don't like to do that. So instead, pay to buy food and then photograph them, or pay to have your fortune read and then and then photograph them. And I think it's courteous. I think it's just a nice kind of a trade to do something like that. More cute kids. And this one actually is a fun little story, just not really intense story, but, just with the way little kids can warm up. She seemed very shy, and then all of a sudden just had this moment of, this clarity where she was just very serene, and the photo just worked, and then immediately following, she got shy again. Huh. But, and just to kind of end the slideshow here, when I was in Vietnam, the weather was very misty and humid. Yeah, I guess it was humid. It was just very misty and foggy and rainy almost the entire time. But it was probably the perfect environment for me to photograph. I got some of the best photos because of that fog. The photos, they would have looked completely different. So weather can definitely be your friend. And last but not least, make sure you take pictures of yourself or get people to take pictures of you so you can prove that you were having a good time. So that ends the slideshow portion of the webinar. I'm going to go ahead and jump into editing a few of these photos here. Are there any questions about the slideshow, Brian, before I jump into the editing?
There are a lot of questions, and I'm going to ask a few of them quickly.
Okay.
Both Gary and Donald were asking, was there any animosity or any feelings about the Vietnam War? Did you get any sense of anything about that?
So the question is if there was any animosity about the Vietnam War, I guess towards me because I'm an American. And no, I didn't. I will say it was, I went to the War Memorial Museum. Not sure if that's the exact correct name for it. But that was a very interesting experience for me because, the Vietnam War is really that's really my only knowledge of Vietnam. Of, anything I know about that, that's all I knew about Vietnam. The museum had a lot of stories of the torture from the side of the Vietnamese people. So, it's very humbling to read things like that and to see things like that. War is horrible, it's devastating, and everyone has their take on it. So, but I never felt that. Honestly, and this is one thing I really liked about going to Vietnam is there were very few Americans. There were a lot of tourists and travelers, but most of them were not American. A lot of Australians. So, and I'm not sure if people could tell where I was from, so maybe they just don't expect, they wouldn't expect me to be American. Maybe they'd expect me to be, I don't know, Australian or Canadian or some sort. So, but no, I never felt that. I never felt that at all. Oh, I'm going to touch on just real quickly, I mentioned it, the copywriting of my photos. So, I mentioned how I used my iPhone to kind of share photos along the way because I wanted to register all of my photos from my Vietnam trip with the U.S. Copyright Office immediately following arrival and getting home and everything. So what I did was I made sure that they were all unpublished. And the reason I did that was just because it was much simpler to register them all as one type, so all unpublished. So if I didn't share any of them publicly, then I was able to do that. So once I got home, I got everything organized and put together, and then I went through the registration process. It's like $30 for to register a batch of images, and I had almost 3,000 images, and I was able to do all of them in with just the $30 with one batch. So. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into editing. I'll start out with this water buffalo guy of this photo that I shared earlier. Let's see, I'll go back to grid view. I'm going to go ahead and pull this over. That's not going to work that way. To the side. I'm just going to drag this into the on one icon in the dock. And now we are into on one software. It opens up immediately into layers. And the first thing I'm going to do this is I'm going to add a focal point adjustment. So I'm going to click the focus button. And here we are. So
go to edit reset all.
I gotcha. Brian's reminding me of something that I was going to discuss. So the first thing I'm going to do is check my bug that I have going on here. And because it was edited previously, I'm guessing this is probably the last thing that Brian did on this computer was some kind of a planer, which is something I'm going to do, but I'm going to reset it because I want to do it my way. So I'm going to go to Edit Reset All, and it automatically brings it back to that default round bug with a lot of blur added. So I'm going to change that to planer because I do want it as a planer. And then I'm going to rotate it around. And I'm probably not going to move it from the center. I'm probably just going to go ahead and keep it right there. But I want to add a little bit of a tilt to this. So I'm going to hold my Option key. And once you hold that Option key, you can see this, as I'm in the center, you can see that it shows the pixel size. It gives you a blur tilt axis thing. I'm not exactly sure what all those numbers mean, but I just go by the grid. So I'm just going to drag it up. You can drag it up, you can drag it backwards, and it's just going to change that plane. So I'll go ahead and drag it up. And I'm going to play around with the amount, because that's quite a bit. And I think I want it more towards the 20s. So that's a little bit better. Now, one just quick tip. When you're putting a bug in, my tendency, because this is where I want it to be in focus, that's what I'm going to literally focus on. I'm going to do some masking and stuff in here. My tendency, is usually to want to drag it over there, but it's usually a good idea to just keep the thing in the center, wherever you want it in the center. Because if you were to go over to, let's say you wanted to actually add a vignette with the focal point. Let's say you're making a preset and you wanted to add a vignette. If you add, I'm just going to do a really crazy vignette just so you can see it. It's always going to add it around the bug. Because if I were to move the bug over here, then the vignette moves all the way over to the left and vice versa. So by keeping it in the center, I'm going to guarantee that that vignette is going to stay centered with the entire image. So I'm going to reset that. I'm not going to add a vignette with this. I just wanted to share that little tip.
You select the second checkbox.
Oh. You could also, Brian says you could also deselect the second checkbox, which is a very smart idea. So. But what if you wanted to follow the bug?
Then you would turn it on.
Brian's pretty smart. He knows this stuff really well. Okay, so I have pretty much everything set. I think I'm going to play with my bloom on the options panel over here. I like pushing that bloom all the way to the right. Even when you don't have crazy bright lights, it doesn't, it's still going to add some really cool bokeh effect. And I also like to change my, where are we? Go back up to that blur panel. I like to increase the curvature so it's like a nice circle. Maybe a little less than a circle, because not all, most apertures aren't pure circles. So I'm also going to go in and do some really good masking on this little bird here. I'm going to zoom in really close because I want to make sure that I really mask him well. So I'm going to go down to my brush tool, click on the brush tool there. And I'm going to change the size of the brush. I'm using the bracket keys on my keyboard. The left makes it go smaller, and the right makes it go a little bit bigger. And I'm going to paint focus, and I'm going to scroll down here so you can see the focus brush panel a little bit better. This is where you're going to actually, set whether you want to paint focus, paint blur, or erase. For the most part, I like to just paint focus, and I just delete. I just undo it if I messed up. So that's kind of my method of operation for this. And the key is just a lot of small changes. I'm going to make sure I get a lot of that fuzz around. I'll zoom in even closer for you guys. I'm going to get all that fuzz around the top part really to go away, because that's the stuff that you're going to see from a distance. And you can change the opacity of the brush, the feather. It usually starts out at a pretty good setting, so for the most part I usually keep it there unless I really need to do fine detailed work. And let me go ahead and check out, where'd my mask go? That was weird. All right, so he started out pretty good. It was just his head part that needed to be fixed a little bit. So I'll go ahead and zoom back out so we are back to normal. I'll go ahead and toggle that preview on and off. I think I'm going to play around with my bug settings again. I'm going to adjust it just a little bit and stretch it out. So the mask should stay where it was. I can just kind of change where I want the mask or the bug to go. Okay, so I'm really just going for a nice kind of a blur to kind of, blur out some of that background. Maybe increase that amount just a little bit to go in the mid-20s. Okay, so I have this where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and click Apply. So I have focal point here on its own layer. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Perfect Effects and just do some more adjusting. I'm not going to get probably too crazy with this image, but I don't think I want to use any presets. I really like using the advanced panel and kind of adding my own effects, my own stacks using the effect options dropdown. So I'll go ahead and start off with where are we? Tone enhancer. That really kind of darkened up the water buffalo there. I'm trying to set everything back down to 0 as much as possible here. Okay, so now we're leveled out. I'll go ahead and add some contrast. Maybe remove some of that shadow detail. Bump up the clarity a little bit. I like that local contrast one. It really kind of adds a little bit of a kind of a grungy look if you really push it. Okay, so we've got, I like what I'm doing here. I'm gonna go ahead and continue. I'm gonna add one of my favorites in the effect options is the duotone. When you first change it there, it's gonna go black and white. But there are a lot of, I like that one, that cyan red. I'm gonna scroll through them. There are a lot of good preset starters, but you can go in and, of course, you can go in and edit them. I'm gonna start out with the cyan red. It's a little too strong to start, so I just drag that strength slider. You can move it all the way to the right and make it really ridiculously bright, or go a little bit to the left. I'm kind of just going for, kind of make this image look a little bit older, and maybe like it came from a film, you know, like a scanned film or something. And I'm also going to play with the blending options, because what I like to do most of the time when I'm working with a duotone is I usually tend to go to the light blending mode. Let's see if that does anything. Yeah, that does. Okay, so the light blending mode, it just adds a little bit of color, and it kind of lightens the whole scene just a little bit, almost like it takes a little bit of the contrast out of the image. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that. And then I'm just going to continue to add some more of my, my favorite effects, things that I like to do. I'm going to go to the black and white. Not because I want it to be black and white, but I want to play with the luminosity. So I've got a black and white layer, and then I clicked on the blending options again to bring up this blending options panel. And if you go all the way down to luminosity, it's not really, oh yeah, it is doing something there. I'm going to go ahead and apply that. It kind of lets you kind of take some of the colors. Like if I were to slide this all the way to the red, I can actually take that and really just kind of play with the weird, you know, colors in that. I'm not really sure if I'm liking what this is doing. Let's see, what did that do? I did a little bit. You know what? I don't like that though, so I'm going to go ahead and change this effect. I'm going to go into a blur. Now this is something I do all the time. I add a blur layer. I usually just keep it at the default. And you know, if I had a really high resolution photo, I might want to change it a little bit. But usually it's pretty good the way it is here. And then I'm going to go back into that blending options. And then if I change it to either soft light or overlay, some of the other ones, hard light looks like it does a similar thing, then it kind of adds a glow to the entire image. And then I can bring the strength down a little bit. It kind of adds, like, I call it a color pop. So you can see like kind of before and after. But I'm going to bring it up a little bit more because I like what it's doing to the grass, but I don't like what it's doing to the water buffalo here. So I'm actually going to mask some of that out. Click on the brush up here. Let me go to my inspector so I can actually see what I've got going on here. All right, so I want to paint out, and painting out means I'm painting with black. So if y'all understand masking, white reveals and black conceals. And that's basically what I just did right there. I painted black over the area that I wanted to hide from that layer, so I concealed that part of the layer. And the white part is that blur overlay, that blur blending mode, that blur stack that I just added. So now my, I basically just set it so that way the water buffalo is not affected by that stack that I just added. Let me go ahead and show you on and off there. So I was just able to add that glow to the outside areas. Okay, so I'm pretty much done here. I think I'm just going to add a quick texture overlay. I've got a few favorites, so it won't take me too hard to get to them. Go ahead and click on textures. And I need to find screen door. That's always my go-to one. Screen door, there you are. Okay, so I've got my screen door texture. I'm going to go ahead and hide that so I've got a full screen. Now, you can also play with the blending options when you're in the screen door mode. Oftentimes, I will go down to the luminosity because some of the textures have color to them. And if I don't want that color added, then I will just remove it with the blending option. But sometimes I actually just like the colors of that blending option, so I'll just change it to color. This one, it didn't really matter because it's a very neutral. It's just, it looks like it's a black and white texture. And you can also kind of change the angle and the way it's positioned. In the image, you can scale it in and out. I'm going to keep it at 0 though because I like the size. And I'm going to add a quick masking bug to this just so I can maybe put some of the texture on the outside and leave the middle part mostly untouched. So I clicked on here, I added a masking bug. It's very similar to the focal point bug that I just added. I'm going to click the inspector though because I want this one to be round instead of the rectangle. And I'm going to, while I'm doing this though, I'm going to show the mask as an overlay because then I can see it a little bit better. So here I'm just drawing, just creating that shape of the area that I don't want the texture to really be affecting. I've got the size really the way I want it, but I actually kind of want to bring it, let's see, what do I want to do here? There we go. So I want to reduce the opacity of the mask a little bit, because it's a little too harsh. I like the outside. I like that most of this is not fully texturized, but I want it just to kind of blend a little bit better and have a little bit of texture. So I'm going to bring the opacity of that mask down just a little bit. And I can actually go back to that overlay, and you should, no, I guess it's kind of showing. You can see how it's red, and then it's getting a little bit, if I were to bring it all the way to 0, there's no more mask anymore. So I'm going to go about like 80, 84%. That's good. And I'll go back to none for that mask. And I am finished with this. So I'm actually, I'm going to go ahead and save this as a preset because I really kind of like it. I'll just save it as water buffalo. Okay, we'll create that and apply. Okay, so I'll just go real quickly here through where I started and adding that focal point and then finishing it off with some nice effects using Perfect Effects. I can save this. Oh, nah, we won't save it. I've got the preset if I want to go back to it. I'll go ahead and close out of this. And I'm going to jump into another one. I'm going to show you guys how... Brian, do I have time for 2 more?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be able to do 2 more photos with you guys. I'm going to use this little girl. We're going to go into Perfect Portrait with this one to start. Okay, so we start off in layers as always. I'm going to jump into the portrait, Perfect Portrait. Click on that portrait link up there. And what it's doing is it's finding the face. And you can see it did a pretty good job. It's got that little bracket around the face. And it has over here in the Faces panel that it found face 1. Now, there are some presets you can start out with, and I'm actually going to start out with a couple of them. I'm going to go through them first and kind of click on them so you can see what they're doing. First, I'm going to zoom into the face, and you can do that pretty quickly just by going View, Fit to Face. So now I can see just the area that I really want to be affected. So let's see, we're on default here. That's a good one. Default, no skin tune. I kind of like this one quite a bit because I usually end up turning off the skin tune, and that's only just because I tend to go into Perfect Effects to actually do the colorization, but it does a pretty good job of evening out the skin if that is something you want to go for. But for now, skin tune here is turned off, so I'm just going to collapse that so it's kind of out of the way. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this down so we can see more of her face. And let's go ahead and start out with the skin retouching. We've just basically, it's got a nice basic amount done to it. You don't really want to push that smoothing too much or you start getting that porcelain look. So it was about, I think it was about right down there. And she doesn't really hardly have any blemishes on her face. So I don't even know if that blemish slider is doing much because, she's just a little girl. But it does do a nice job of adding a little bit of smoothness to it. Just enough so that way it doesn't look like it was really edited. I don't really like my images to be over-processed, to where they just look fake, especially with little kids. You want little kids to look like little kids. Okay, so we've got the eyes on there as well. And you know, one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to edit the masks on this. Because what happens is when you jump into Perfect Portrait, it detects the face and it masks everything. It masks the skin on the face, it masks out the eyes and the mouth. And sometimes it might need a little bit of refinement. Everybody has different faces. So I'm going to go ahead and show those masks. And this first one here is the face area. And you can see there are little areas that just need to be kind of touched up a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead, let me see what we're painting. Oops, I'm going to paint out. So it's set to painting in. If I hit the X key, it's going to paint out. And again, I can resize just by using those bracket keys. And I'm just going to paint over her hair. It doesn't have to be perfect. Paint over her ear. Oops, that maybe was a little much. So I'm going to hit X and just go in and fix that. And change my brush size a little bit because some of the skin area down here needs to be added in. X again, so I'm painting out. And get all this area so it's out. And I also want to get in those lips a little bit. All right, and the crease of her eye probably doesn't need to. I'm getting a little bit more detailed probably than I need to. And now if I just kind of go through these, I can go to the eyes and I can make sure that our eyes look good, which that's like a perfect mask for the perfect portrait. And go into the mouth. And the mouth for some reason did this weird funky thing down here. So I'm going to paint this out. You know, and I actually found that sometimes using the dark blending mode, see how I was able to see, let's see, wait, overlay. There's some area down here that because the mask is red and, her, you know, most people's skin tone have some sort of redness in them, regardless of your ethnicity, using that dark blending mode actually brings a lot of that area out that I need to remove. So now I'm able to kind of paint around it. It almost makes it look like it's like black light kind of a thing. And if I hit X, then I can paint in. Oops, I think I'm clicking the wrong button here. Paint in, there we go. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm kind of a perfectionist, so you'll forgive me. Let me go ahead and check the eyes with that. You know, see there were some eye areas in the eyes that I missed as well. Oops, don't want to do that. So I want to paint out some of that area around. And that is good. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command M. That brings me out of the mask. You can go in and out of the mask just by clicking Command M. And I'll go ahead and zoom out. See how we're looking. This is a preview before and after. Okay, so I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to do a little bit of just some minor touch-up work using the retouch brush. She just has a little bit of messiness on her face here. I'm actually going to back out a little bit to do this. Not too much though. She has a very clean face. Most little kids do. Okay, so let it pop in. There we go. I'm going to preview that. This is before and after. Before and after. And that's looking good. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Apply for this. Now I'm going to jump into Perfect Effects and just kind of give this a nice little cross-process look. I actually have some presets that I've created, and these are in the On1 Marketplace too, if you guys are interested in. I've got two that are in there right now. I've got these right here. Just ignore these on the left because I'm just those I'm working on. But I've got a portrait film and an instant film that are available in the Marketplace if you guys are interested in downloading any presets. The cool thing about buying them from the Marketplace is that they're completely editable. You can go in and make changes to them. So I've started out here with a preset called Sun Faded. I'm going to drop this down now. Where did it go? Come on, preset. Come back. What's happening here? Oh, there we go. It's just thinking really hard. Okay, so here's my Sun Faded preset. Now, I actually want to go back in and kind of do some editing to the coloring of this. I'm not sure if I want this to be as blue as it is. So all I have to do is click this expand button. And now these are all of the layers that I created these are all the stacks that I made when I actually made this preset. So starting out with the duotone filter, that's actually the color that I want to change. So I could go ahead and just maybe move that strength down, or I could go in and actually move the specific saturation of just that one color. Whenever I'm doing any kind of duotone or color picking, I really like using this hue, saturation, brightness, HSB sliders. I think it's just, I get a lot more accurate color. I'm able to really select the hue, you know, whatever color I want, and then the saturation. I just feel like I have a lot more control over it. So that's just kind of a little tip there for what I like to do. There are a lot of different other options. That's an interesting way of saying it. But I just find that this one's a little bit easier for me to work with. So go ahead and click OK with that and go back up to that top layer and see. Yeah, I think that did a nice job. It kind of brought some of that back. I've got an empty stack here, so I'm going to go ahead and check out my presets again. I'll go ahead and see what do I have here for the instant film ones. Velvet color, that one looks nice. Okay, I like this one, but again, I want to go ahead and change it. Pop in, there we go. So I'm going to click expand. And see, it looks like we started right here with the duotone. I'm wondering if I just got rid of that duotone and delete that layer. And I'll just go back up to the top. There we go. So yeah, so now I have like a nice kind of a glowing image with a little bit of color pop. So there's the before. And there's the after. I'm going to go ahead and save this preset as well. And I'll call this just portrait. Can I spell? There we go. I'll organize those all later. Okay, so I don't know why I applied that because I didn't need to save it, but I'm going to go ahead and quit out of here. And I think I have time for one more image to edit. Go ahead and quit. Won't save you. And let's go ahead and edit the pottery hands. So again, I like to take, you know, there are a few different ways that you can edit. There are a few different ways, I should say, that I really like to work out of Lightroom. If I have a photo that's either a PSD, TIFF, JPEG, I'll usually just take it straight from the dock or from the grid, and I'll just drop it into the Perfect Photo Suite. You can also go to File, Plug in Extras, and then Perfect Photo Suite. Another good way to do it. That's usually good if you're working with RAW files. Opens up the same way. Okay. So the very first thing that this is calling for me is texture. I want to add more texture to this image. I could go into effects and I could add a texture from effects, but I don't want to do that. I want to add a texture using layers. So I am going, where are we going here? I'm going to go to File and Browse Backgrounds. If you have your own backgrounds, you can actually go into the file and the browser, and you're able to actually select a folder. And let's say you have a texture folder, you could actually add your own layer onto this. You don't have to just use the ones from On One. So however you guys want to do it. I think walls is where I'm going. Yeah, so this wall right here, wall 1, I'm just going to double click it. And then it's going to ask me, you know, if I want to open this up as a new document. But I want to add this as a layer. So I'm going to click Add. And then I'm going to drop this down so I can see the whole thing. Now, I think I'm going to play around with the positioning. And to do that, you just click on this tool up at the very top left. Zoom out just a little bit, and you can see you've got those little anchors around the side. So you can turn it, twist it, resize it, transform it. If you hold your Option key and your Shift key while clicking and drag, oops, that was the perspective. I didn't want to do that. Let's try that one more time. All right. Why can't I resize? There we go. Once you're resizing, if you hold your Shift and your Option key, or I believe it's Alt on a PC, then you can resize from the center. And I just want to kind of get it more so it's the same size as my original document. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click Apply for that. I'll go back to my hand tool because I like that one. Now, of course, I need to blend this in with the bottom layer because I can't see the bottom layer, and I want to be able to see them both. So I'm going to go down to my blending mode, and most of the time I'm going to use either overlay or I'm going to use soft light. I think for this one I'm going to use overlay because I can always reduce that opacity down a little bit if I want to. Oops. Okay, so now I have the texture, but I want to do a little bit of masking to this. So I'm going to go ahead and head over to my masking brush, bring up that inspector so I can actually see what I've got going on. First thing I'm going to do is bring that feather all the way up. I really like to work with a very, very heavily feathered brush. And I'm also going to bring my brush opacity down. I can do that by dragging on this, or if I click my option, or I believe it'd be the Alt key on a PC, and click a number. So if I hit 2 there, and it went straight to 20%, and 3 is 30, 1 is 10, and so on and so forth. So that is going to change the opacity of your brush. If I wanted to change the opacity of the entire layer, I just click those numbers. That was 10%, this is 50%, this is 100%. So right now I'll keep it at 100%, and I'm going to just paint with a really low opacity brush. Actually going to go to 20% on that brush. So that way I'm making smaller changes, and the edges aren't going to be as harsh of a change. You know, when I get to the edge of the, let's say like the edge of the hand here. Maybe in some of these areas I'm going to maybe jump up to 40%, back down to 20%. I just have, it's a really easy workflow to be able to just kind of keep your hand on, you know, like one hand on the keyboard, the other hand on your mouse, or I'm using a Wacom tablet right now. Okay, so I don't want to take all of the texture out of this clay, just some of it. Now I'm going to go ahead and play around with the actual opacity of the entire layer once I get this in here. Well, first let me go ahead and show you what this mask looks like. Again, it's going to be white reveals and black conceals. So all the area that's, you know, that black or anywhere in between, you know, black, gray is going to be hiding the texture overlay at some point. So, and there's the all the different ways you can look at your mask. But I'm going to bring my opacity of the layer down. I'm just going to do it from the panel here, just a little bit. Just want it to be kind of just showing through a little bit. I don't want it to be super, super, super obvious. Okay, so I like what I got going on here. Now I want to jump into perfect effects, but before I can do that, I need to make sure that I'm working off of a composite image of what I've done here, because I actually have 2 layers, and if I were to jump into perfect effects with this wall background or overlay, texture overlay layer that I have going on here, it would only do the editing to this layer. So I need to go to Layer, New Layer from Composite, and that takes all the visible layers below and makes it its own layer. So I could hide both of these layers here, and I'm still seeing the same thing that I had before. So, alrighty. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into Effects. And I have a feeling that I'm going to want to go black and white on this image. There are some pretty good presets already available. But again, the control freak in me, I want to do this by hand. So I'm going to drop that down, and my first stack is going to be a black and white. Usually starts out with just a very basic general black and white, but you can actually play with the color filter, and most of the time a blue filter looks horrible on images, but in this case I found that it actually does a really nice job. So I'm just going to kind of increase that contrast. I don't think I want any grain in this image, so I'm going to bring that grain strength down. Oh, I guess it was already at none, so I don't need it to be down. But if you wanted to add some, you could go ahead and add grain with that little drop down. I do want to add a toner though, and there are some nice ones to start here. I think brown is probably the closest to what I want to get, and you can also go into the custom and select your custom tone. So I could even just kind of make my own brown color there, click OK. Then that was actually probably exactly what I wanted to go for. So now I have a nice start with my black and white. I'm going to go ahead and click Add and keep going. I'm going to add another black and white layer, but this is not to add black and white, but I want to add drama to the image. So I'm going to change the blending mode to overlay. And that does, oh, let me see what soft light does. Soft light's kind of just like a lesser version of overlay. So I'm going to use soft light. It did quite a bit to it, a little too intense. So I'm just going to drop that down. Let's see, go all the way to 0 and then just bring it up a little bit. Okay, so that's nice. I'm gonna kind of see where I'm at, a little before and after here. That's good. I think it's getting a little dark for my taste, so I'm gonna add another stack. I'm gonna go into the tone enhancer, and I'm going to, let's see, I'm gonna kind of bring everything down to 0 again. Just bring up some of that contrast. I'm sorry, with some of the brightness, maybe not that much. Some of the shadows a little bit, and the contrast. So yeah, so I brightened it up just a little bit, and I'm gonna go ahead and add one more layer. I'm gonna do that same thing I did in a previous image. I'm gonna add a blur, and then I'm going to change my blending options to soft light, kind of to give it a little bit of a glow to it, and click apply. And where's that come from? I got a little bit of hot stuff happening on this hand here. I'm just gonna kind of figure out which layer it's on and mask it out. Oh, maybe it's not coming on a layer. I have an idea. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do another tone enhancer. I'm going to make an adjustment. Let's see that. There we go.
Yeah.
There's my highlights. That's what I wanted. I thought I was gonna have to mask it out, but this thing does an awesome job, and I didn't have to. So I just brought that highlights up, and it kind of brought some of that detail back into the shadows. So I'm gonna go ahead and click apply. Didn't save this one. It's all right. And we'll kind of walk through what I did here. I started out with just my image. I added that texture. I did a composite, so I was working on the whole image, and then I have a nice contrasty black and white with texture. And I believe with that, I am finished here. Brian, are there any questions about anything? Ooh, I'm excited.
No. When you were out shooting, do you typically shoot in manual or aperture priority?
Okay, the question is, do I shoot in manual or aperture priority? And that's going to depend. The way I do it is, it depends on whether I'm using a tripod or if I'm hand-holding. When I'm hand-holding, for the most part, I'm using aperture priority because I want to control the depth of field in my image, and I will use my exposure compensation on my camera if I need to increase or decrease the exposure on an image. So that's for handheld photography. When I'm on a tripod, I'm pretty much 100% manual. Everything is manual. My exposure's manual. My focusing's manual. Next question.
Oh, did you have any problems eating the local food?
Okay.
Or did you get sick at all from anything over there?
The question was if I had any problems eating the food or if I got sick, and no, I did not. Like I said, I'm a pretty adventurous eater, so I eat a lot of different things even at home. I'm pretty familiar with Asian food in general. It was just I think the combinations of things, and none of the food, there was nothing wrong. Like I didn't get food poisoning, anything like that. No stomach problems or whatsoever. So it's all good.
Tapas was asking whether on the pottery, would you actually use a motion blur at all on it, or you just kind of like have your...
You mean like in Photoshop?
Yeah.
The question is asking if I'd add any kind of motion blur. Are they asking about this specific image or just in general?
On that one.
No, this photo, the photo that in front of me right now, in front of everyone right now, is that was just straight photographed. I'm not sure what let me go back to Lightroom and see. 1/40th of a second. So it was a pretty slow exposure, slow enough to where that was moving fast enough to actually blur it. And I was just being very careful with hand holding because I was 144 millimeters. So yeah, that's pretty slow for that. It's a pretty slow exposure for that focal length. So, but I wanted that. I wanted the because I could have bumped my ISO up and dropped my aperture down to f4, but I wanted a little bit of blur in there, so which is probably why I had that. But no, I didn't need to add any actual photoshopping blur to it, thankfully.
Do you use the ISO? Was that manually set, or did you use auto ISO?
That's actually a good question. That question was about using ISO and if I had it auto or manually set. I don't know exactly what I had set on here. I may be able to look at the metadata and find out. But oftentimes when I'm out photographing things like this, I will set it to auto ISO because for me, getting the photograph in focus and not motion blurred is more important than a low ISO with low grain. Looking at it at this size, this actually is not the full. I don't think this is the full resolution. I might be able to find the full resolution so we can actually, I can actually show you what it looks like. But I don't mind grain anymore. I used to. I think this is kind of an edited version of it. So here, you can see that that's the grain in the image. It doesn't necessarily look bad. But I wanted to make sure that I had, at least some portion of her hand. And my focus is really, I got like my focus like right in here. It's a very shallow image. But that grain to me is not, it doesn't bother me. ISO 800, most cameras these days, you can go pretty high before you're going to see anything that's detrimental to an image. So, but oftentimes I do shoot in auto ISO when I'm in situations like this. Now, if I'm out shooting landscapes where the ISO, it doesn't really matter, then I'm going to be at ISO 100. If I'm photographing for stock, if I'm photographing food and I'm in a controlled environment, then I'm going to be shooting at ISO 100. So that's usually how I work with my ISO.